There are some great questions that parents can ask their child's coaches before the season begins, before you join a team. These are also great questions for coaches to think about and really kind of know where they stand on these issues and help in preparation for their season. First, pretty obvious, for me, if I was asking a coach a question about a team my child played on, was I would want to know from the coach, what the coach's goals are for the team throughout the season. And I would want this to be specific, and coaches would want this to be specific as well. You don't want, hey, I want the players to get better and enjoy the game. Hopefully that's what we all want, and that would be the result of the goals, but these goals should be pretty specific to the team, to the age group, to the level of what the team wants to accomplish throughout the year, and not necessarily, hey, we want to win X many games or win this many championships. It's, as a team, what we are doing on the field. By the end of the season, we want to see X. We want the players to be able to know how to do Y. These are things that coaches should have in their mind, as approaching a season, because it would help direct everything you do in training and in games and helping the players reach these goals. Another common question, which I think we ask as the season goes on, but should be asked beforehand, is the coach's approach to playing time. Again, there's a lot of different views on this in terms of age group, level of team, and how this is approached. I will not get into kind of what's right, what's wrong. I think it really depends on each team, each age group, the coach, the player. But this would be a very good thing for a parent to ask to a coach, so they really have understand how playing time is determined throughout the course of a season. And it's also, again, good for a coach to know and really kind of be able to verbalize what their approach is, so it's clear. Not everybody always agree, but it should be clear before the season starts. Next would be positions. How do you determine which players play different positions? How much will you rotate? Do you tend to keep players into the same position throughout the entire season or game? So that's something that's important, at different age groups, maybe different importance for different players and parents, to know kind of what the expectation is and how, positions will be determined for players, how much movement there will be, what type of considerations would be taken into account to move players. And again, things that are very important for coaches to be able to understand and verbalize, not just to the parents, but to the players themselves, over the course of the season. Next, great question is, what would your practice look like? What would a typical practice session look like if I, walked up to a training session? What would I expect to see? It's a very open-ended question, and hopefully, would allow a coach to kind of talk about how their training sessions are structured, how it starts, what you would typically see, because, all coaches approach training differently. Again, not getting into right or wrong, but, some coaches might have more of a fluid, kind of relaxed, kids are kind of, making those decisions, moving around type of training session. Others might be a little more structured where, players are, kind of moving in certain places at certain times. It's very kind of the same thing each week. Again, every coach is a little bit different and approach it differently. So it's good for a parent to understand what, they should expect to see, each week if I'm watching a training session. Not that every training session would be the same, but, what are, basic expectations there. Another great question for a parent to ask a coach is, how would you like me to communicate with you? If I have a question or I have a concern, how would you like to be, contacted about that? When would you like to be contacted about that? Those are very important things also for coaches to make sure it's clear for the parents. It's sometimes best if there's some kind of question or concern that, it's brought up or addressed in a way that, both parties have agreed to address those things ahead of time. Some coaches have a policy that, if you have questions about the game, wait 24 hours before you reach out. Others coaches are, fine with them, meeting right after a game. It's very important that those kind of expectations and barriers are set before a season, and hopefully in a way that it does allow a lot of access and communication back and forth between the coaches and parents, but setting up and having a clear understanding of how coaches and parents will communicate and how they should communicate with each other throughout the year is important. So that's a great question to ask as well. And then finally, and one that I think we don't ask enough is, how can I help at home? So throughout the season, what your expectations for the parents in terms of how they will help their child throughout the season. What questions do you want us to ask? What can we do in terms of extra things at home? What type of support do you need from us to help the season be successful? So these are some really good questions to ask coaches before the season begins. And again, like I said, these are great questions for coaches to ask themselves and kind of make sure that they have answers and these expectations, because sometimes we just don't think about it and we just start the season and see how it goes. And sometimes having these questions answered and having these policies and expectations set before the season begins helps everybody, the coaches, the parents, and especially the players, have a great season.